mindset. For a lot of people, it's hard to transition into what a civilian world looks like, because you join so young that you don't know what being a grown up in the world is. So you've only been a child in the world.
Right.
Then you go and you're a man or a woman in the military, which is not the rest of the world. And so then you come out and you're an adult, and now what do?
That makes sense.
You've never been an adult, and you've never been an adult in the world before. So it's really difficult.
So I have a question. Dan, what does he do again?
I'm sorry?
Dan Joyner.
Oh,
Nephew.
Honestly, I don't think he's going to be airborne infantry. But before we get going too much farther, guys, I got to say the number one more time, just in case we have listeners who've kind of come in late. It's 405-534-4747. And the reason I bring up these numbers is because these are meant to be discussional dialogue. We don't want to just basically have the complete say as to how this whole discussion is going to happen. So please give us a call. Join our discussion. Throw out a question that you might have for either myself or Bradley or even Annie, who is a spouse who has had to deal with a PTSD veteran, and the nightmare that can be for you is something that spouses
Right.
Might need to know about. Neither of us are trying to say that you don't want to join the military. Nobody wants to say that at all. I believe in those kinds of opportunities of service, and I think Bradley does as well. But we have
Absolutely.
to make those informed decisions, right?
Right.
So we have to start discussing about these things. Bradley and I were discussing that most of our military compadres kind of come from a particular mold. And we were talking about how they tend to usually be from a certain background and hold on to high levels of nationalism. That's part of their reasoning for joining or being part of these sorts of military careers. So for me, I was in a very nationalistic household. I believed that serving your country was akin to serving God. I believed that we lived in a Christian nation. I believed that our values were superior to other countries' values. Did you kind of come in with some of that?
Man, you're speaking my history, man. I remember just my grandpa who served in the Air Force, and he retired. I worshipped him. I thought he was the greatest thing ever, And then my other grandfather was a pastor, and he was a state representative. So basically, faith and nationalism intertwined. And so I'm thinking, yeah, I love this country. I love God. Everybody loves this country. Everybody loves God. That's my mindset didn't know that there was other people out there who didn't love our country or didn't worship our country and didn't have this blind faith in God in a certain way that I did back then. And so, yeah, I was in that same spot that you're talking about where serving your country was serving God. It was doing your job on this earth. And I did think that America was, better than all the other countries. We were obviously a Christian nation, and we're very technologically advanced. We got all the money, so we must be doing something right. So yeah, America for life. And I'm going to go serve God. And, my first deployment, I told myself, and after talking to my doctor, my therapist and stuff, I feel like maybe it's just what I told myself so that I could get through that situation. But I thought I was on a modern day crusade.
Mm-hmm.
I was sent to Iraq by God himself.
Yeah. And you, I understand that feeling Exactly. Now, question is, when did that illusion begin to dissolve?
Oh man, yeah. So my third deployment was rough. We drove around a lot. We were up on the Syrian border in like western, northwestern Iraq, and we were there was just IEDs everywhere all the time, mines. It was not a good deployment, and we were just driving around. By this time I was an E4. I was a corporal, and I was in charge of a mobile assault platoon section. So I had 4 up armored Humvees with heavy machine guns and stuff, and 15 Marines and a corpsman, millions of dollars worth of comm equipment. I'm only 22 years old at this time. And like I'm king of the world. I could have done anything I wanted to, in that country. And but nonetheless, driving around, constantly worried about getting killed in an explosion, and it happened a lot on that deployment to guys in our unit. And the tactics were crazy, but we had started developing in our little AO, our area of operation. Like there was a call-in phone number that the local people could call into and try and give tips about bad guys. And they were using it. They were actually calling in.
Yes.
So then I'm starting thinking like, hold on, these guys are helping us.
Yes.
What?
And it was like so weird to me that the local people were trying to help us catch the bad guys, because the bad guys weren't the local people. They weren't the Iraqi populace.
Right.
Some of the bad guys were Iraqis. You can't deny that. But they weren't everybody. Everybody in that country didn't hate us. And so now I started getting confused. But then, I left that deployment. I went on to Washington, D.C., and I went to be a drill instructor. And during my time as a drill instructor, I was having a conversation with one of my friends who had never really deployed to a combat environment. And he was asking me a lot of questions. He was another drill instructor, and we were we were at the rifle range, and we were just talking. Things started coming up, and this is 2014, so 10 years after my initial deployment to Iraq. At that point in my life, I just started realizing some things that were really upsetting to me. And I decided to go and, start talking to somebody about it, because it didn't make any sense. And I didn't know how to deal with what I started feeling. I started feeling these, like I had been let down, like I had been deceived, like I had been used as a puppet. And that wasn't cool with me. But I loved the Marine Corps, so I didn't know what to do about, like, how do I not be a puppet but still do what I love? And so it's like
some strong cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah, you start getting ripped apart, and you don't know how to put yourself back together.
Yeah, and it brings back a lot of memories. And you found a way to put yourself back together, and it seems like you finally began doing God's work, or at least on that path, as you are now in seminary. Tell me what the future holds for you.
Oh man. Well, it took me a while to even figure this out. I didn't even know I was going to be a seminarian until 2018. But I had like this awakening experience while meditating one day in January of 2018. And it was like everything I had been talking to God about had just kind of come to fruition in a vision or something, like while I was meditating. And I saw myself, behind a pulpit, and I saw myself behind a desk, and I saw myself making things better for people. And so I asked, like, what is this? What does that look like? How does this work, and how do I get there? Well, I went to my grandfather, who was a minister and a state representative here in Oklahoma, and I started talking to him about it. And I said, Grandpa, like, if I'm going to do these things, how do I achieve that? And so he he went to Phillips before it was just a seminary. He went to Phillips College, and he went to Yale Divinity School. So he got his MDiv from Yale, and I didn't have what it takes to go to Yale Divinity School. So I picked the next best thing, which was Phillips, and I just knew, like, from the first time I requested information, I knew that's the place that I had to be to get to where I want to go. And, so my future, right now I'm running for school board, and I hope to use this to springboard me into bigger political levels. I do intend on running for state representative and state senator. I want to make big changes in our social justice systems, in our criminal justice system, in all these different things. I've got these big plans, but I also want to preach God's word and God's grace and God's love to people, and show people the God that I know, the God that loves me.
Right.
And so,
in what better way than to start working in the educational system? You say you're running for school board office?
Yeah, so I'm running for school board up here in Guthrie, Oklahoma. That's where my children go to school.
Cool.
And it just so happened the ward that I live in was up for election this year, and I decided I'm going to run because the schools are all suffering. We live in Oklahoma. Our state is one of the bottom, I think it's in the bottom,
yes,
I know it's in the bottom 5 states in the country because of for our education system. And so if I can help our district do some turning around, I've got plans to help on a larger level. I've been working on a policy I was working on with my grandfather before he passed to try and change the way that we fund education in our state. And that deals with changing the way, where money goes and how it gets distributed and this and that. And I don't want to get into that, but I see a problem and I can't do anything about it if I don't try. I don't want to be the guy who just sits there and complains about how bad the schools are, but doesn't do anything to help the schools. I don't want to be the guy who complains about people in jail, but then doesn't do anything to try and help people in jail.
A soldier never wants to be on the bench, and you are still a soldier.
Yeah.
And you're fighting a good fight. We're almost out of time, but I want to thank you, Bradley, for coming on and being part of this show tonight. Unfortunately, we don't have any callers, but that's okay because that really kind of allowed our conversation to flow without having to kind of negotiate what a caller might bring to the table.
I love his story. Yeah. It parallels yours, and then it doesn't. So
yeah,
that's cool. I mean, whenever we started talking, we just really clicked. We meshed real well, and it's like we were telling each other's story, or we were telling each other's understandings. It was pretty cool.
Well, I'm so glad you two unicorns got to meet.
Yes.
Me too. And anyone listening, if you're out there thinking about joining the military, listen, don't let anything that I've said make your decision for you. Love your country. It's okay to love your country.
Right.
Love your faith. It's okay to love your faith. But it's not what I wanted to get to, and we're running out of time, so we can't, but don't just follow blindly loving your faith and loving your country, because there are things that you should question.
Bradley,
but
I
still
want to go ahead and actually have you back.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
For another show in 1 month's time. Because I think that what's going to end up happening is people are going to hear this and they're going to want to know more. Would you be willing to do that in a month?
Heck yeah!
Oh, thank you.
All right. Then what we'll do is we will just abbreviate that. We'll let the callers and the emails come in, maybe find more stories, and we will have more time to kind of bring all this together and get to what you want to talk about. Because I think what you want to talk about is also what I want to talk about. And it's something that does need to get talked about, because we're at a place where our country could go in a weird direction. And supporting some of the things our country is doing, we have to decide what the right thing is.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
It's going to be difficult. Bradley, thank you so much. Thank you so